Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with the workshop. So this is our first workshop. We'll have about 10 workshops throughout the next 2 weeks. So our first workshop is going to be on HTML and CSS. So during this workshop, we're going to be making our CADbook profile. So first, or I guess what CADbook is, it's our perfect social media website. And so for this workshop, we're going to need VS Code and a terminal. So if everyone opens up a terminal, we can get started with the workshop. So after opening your console for the terminal, we're going to see, you want to CD into the directory that you actually want to store the code for this workshop. So I'll put mine on the desktop. So I'll CD into desktop. Next. And then you'll want to go to the browser and go to weblab.is/CADbook. And this will take you to the repo for the workshop. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to clone the repository. So first we can go to, click this green button here, copy this HTTPS URL. And once you have that copied, go back to the terminal and just run git clone and then the URL. So if you do that, it should say it's cloning into CADbook React, and then it'll actually clone the repository. The repository is pretty large, so it might take a second to clone. And once that's done, it will say done. Go ahead. So that'll be that's the actual, on this, we have the slides on the right, so the first line will be actually what we're typing to clone, and then after you clone the repository, we want to change directory or CD into the CADbook React folder. What's the next slide? Okay. And then once we're in the next slide or into the CADbook React folder, we're going to want to type git checkout to actually get the workshop, and then w0-starter. And I'll give everyone a minute to catch up and get there. And if you have any questions, just raise a hand for now. Kenneth, is the queue open now? Okay, and if you guys have any questions throughout the duration of the workshop, we have the questions doc, so weblab.is/questions. And then we also have weblab.is/queue, which is kind of a help queue. So if you just go on the help queue, you can just put in your information, and we'll a staff member will come around to help you during the workshop. Does anyone need more time for this? Okay. What's the next slide? Is it? Okay. I'll give about 30 more seconds. Okay, so next, we're going to want to open the workshop in VS Code. So you can just go to VS Code and press File, Open Folder, and you'll want to open up the CADbook React folder. And then once you have that open, you should have a few files on the left. So you'll have index.html, and the style. Mainly you'll have the index.html and the styles files, and those are the ones we'll be mainly working in, and the rest we can just ignore those for now. Okay. So one other thing that we're going to want to do is with HTML, formatting is pretty hard, and indentation as well. So we're going to actually install an extension to kind of help us with this. And so we're going to want to install the Prettier VS Code extension. And what this formatter does is every time you press save, it will reformat your code. So in order to install this extension, you're going to want to press on these the little tiles here on the left. And then once you type in Prettier, and it should be the first thing that pops up. And then I already have it installed, but it should say install or something like that. And then you can go ahead and install that. So just again, the tiles on the left, Prettier here, and then you should be able to install it. Does anyone need more time for this? And if you guys have any troubles with installation, feel free to join the queue, and someone can help as well. So after we have that installed, you're going to want to go to the settings in the bottom left and go to settings. And then in the settings, we're going to want to type formatter. And then the first thing we should get is, it says editor with a default formatter. We're going to want to select Prettier. And then if you scroll down a bit, there should be a format on save. We want to turn that on so every time we save the file, it'll reformat. So again, selecting Prettier here in our default formatter, and then turning on format on save. If you can't find format on save, you can also just search format on save in the search as well. Yeah, it should be in the bottom left at the wheel, and then just open that and settings should be there. Yeah. Okay. I think it should be okay. Okay. So with the old code that we had, if we ran Prettier, we would get something like this. Next. Okay. So let's start looking at the code that we have. So let's open up index.html. And so this is kind of our starter code. We have our capbook title, which is inside of our head. So since this is inside of the head, this is kind of like the metadata of our website. So we actually will see here in our, on Chrome, we see our capbook. And for the body or the text of the website, we actually have hello world, and that renders there. Sorry. To actually open up the file, you can go to wherever you put the file and drag this index.html into your browser, and it should load up the website. I think on Safari you can also just click it and it should open, or like on Mac. I don't think so. Kenny, you can't run VS Code, right? To open the HTML file. You can't run the VS Code to open the HTML file, right? Yeah. I don't think you can run VS Code. I think you have to drag drop from your terminal or your Finder or File Explorer. Okay. Okay. And there's kind of an animation to do that. So Our goal for the website is going to actually create this, this website here. So we're going to have some profile picture, some name, in this case Buka Buka, and then a little bit of stuff about us. So our first step is going to be some of the bare bones HTML. And so this, you guys will get to kind of do this. So if you haven't already, run git reset -- hard, and then git checkout w0 -starter, which will give us the starting code for that. So for the first exercise, let's try adding some text in the about us in the index.html. So recall we have our HTML tag, h1, p, and div tags, and maybe some others will be useful like section. Don't have to really worry about this right now, but if you want to try using it, you can. And so we're going to want to try to create this website, this layout here. So Buka Buka, and then an about me with some little text about us, and then something else about you as well. And I'll give everyone about 2 to 3 minutes to try and do that. Actually, I pulled them up on my phone. Does anyone want more time? Okay, I'll give about 30 more seconds or another minute. Okay, so the first thing we're kind of wanting to do is actually add our title, Buka Buka. So to do this, maybe we'll want to create a header, h1, and we'll want to write Buka Buka inside of our opening and closing tags. And if we save our file and refresh our web browser, we should see that we get Buka Buka on the web browser. So now for like the rest, we would maybe want to create, have a section where we're going to put our, maybe another header for our about me. So maybe we'll want to use h4. So the larger the number, the smaller the size. So maybe we'll want to have about me. And then maybe after that, we're going to want to have something about us. So we can use just a paragraph. And maybe we want to say something like, I am like 21 years old or something like that. And if we save that and refresh our browser, we should get an about me and whatever you wrote on, inside of the tags. And then lastly, we can maybe make another section, kind of just group these things together. And we'll want to maybe say my favorite type of cat. Sorry, actually. I want to put that into another header. And maybe my favorite type of cat. And then maybe after that, we'd want to have some text about it, like I actually prefer turtles. If we save that and refresh our browser, we should also get that to render on the browser. Next. So that is the end of exercise 1. To actually catch up with us, if you haven't finished it, you can do run git reset -- hard, which clears your local changes. Make sure you save the file before you run this command. And then you can run git checkout w0 - step 1 to catch up. So just a brief clarification and git review on why we're running these commands. So why do we keep running git reset -- hard and git checkout and then some thing? What do these commands even do? So git reset -- hard resets the local version of your code on your computer to match the last committed version of the code. And it irreversibly deletes all of your local uncommitted changes. So we can kind of think about this using this diagram. So we have GitHub, which is where our code is stored, and we also have our code locally stored. And like I said, we kind of have the code in the middle. And many minutes later, we're going to work on our code, and our code's going to become maybe some mess. And maybe we want to actually restore our code to the original version because we've made a lot of changes. Maybe it doesn't work. But maybe we've made a lot of changes and we have to hit the undo 1,000 times. And VS Code actually won't even let us do this. So this is where this command comes in handy. After we run git reset -- hard, our code would be back into the original state of what was on GitHub in that repository, in that branch. So git checkout with the workshop number for, in our case, the workshop W for workshop, the number of the workshop, and what step we're on. It retrieves the branch from GitHub. So in the case that we had, we ran git reset -- hard to clear our local changes, and then git checkout w0 - step 1 to get to the end of step 1, which is the step that we just worked on. And the code will be the code to actually generate this. So if we ran git reset -- hard, and then git checkout w0 - step 1, our code should be what was on should be what's on the slide. I'll give everyone a minute or so to catch up. Okay, so now we're going to want to add an image. So the image we're going to want to add is like this image here, or any image that you guys want. And so recall the image tag and its attribute from earlier. And we're going to just want to add the image tag, say, above the text that we just wrote. So I give everyone a minute or two to do that. We also provided an image in the there for you. If inside of the Catbook React folder we have a cat.png, if you guys want to use that image as well. Give about 15 more seconds. Okay, so let's implement this. So we want to add the image above the text from that we wrote earlier. So to actually add an image, we'll use the image tag. And since we don't want any text with the image tag, we can use a self-closing tag. So instead of having just the normal greater than sign, we can add a slash before it, and we don't need the tag here at the end. And the attribute for the image is source, so src. And then we want to add the directory to our image. So we're in the Catbook React folder, which is where we're working. So we have our cat.png in that directory. So we can just enter cat.png and save the file, and then refresh the browser, and we should get the image. So again, we just added our image, image self-closing tag, our attribute src, and then cat.png for the image. So with that, that completes exercise 2. So to catch up, run git reset -- hard after you save the file, and then git checkout w0 step 2. And I guess just one note is if you make some changes to the file and you don't save them and you run git reset -- hard, it will run the command. But then if you try to git checkout, the next step, and then you try to save, you're going to get this failed to save error because we have changes that weren't saved or put on the repo. So you should be able to just X this off, close out the changes, don't save them, and then just run git reset -- hard again, and then run the checkout command. So with that, we're on to the next step. So for the next step, we're going to want to center some HTML. So right now we have our image, and we have our text down here. We have Buka Buka and all of this left aligned. But what we're going to want to do is we're going to make it more stylish. So it's time to actually link our CSS spreadsheet to our HTML. So in order to do that, we're going to want to go into our CSS file. And right now we don't have any CSS, but we're going to add some now. Or actually in a second, sorry. And then go back to the index.html file. And since this is kind of metadata for our website, like the styles, we're going to go inside of our head tag. And underneath title, we're going to use the link tag. And here the attribute is rel. And the relationship here is just a style sheet. And the directory to that is just styles.css. And here we can just use a self-closing tag because there's no text as well. So now that we've added this link, we actually have our style sheet linked to our HTML. So the next thing we're going to want to do is create our CSS. So now we can open up our CSS. And the CSS here that we're going to actually want to add is some CSS to center text. So in this case, we're going to name our class u-text center, and it's going to align text to be centered. And after we have this in our style sheet, we can go back to our HTML, and inside of our H1, we can add our attribute class, and then the name of the attribute. So we named it u-text-center. So we want to have class equal to u-text-center. And once we do that and we refresh our browser, the text that we centered should be centered. So again, in styles.css, we define some class u-text-center, and we use its attribute text-align with center. And then in our HTML, we set our attribute, which was class, equal to the value u-text-center, which is the name of the class in our style sheet. So you may be wondering why we used the U. We call these kinds of classes that just apply one CSS attribute. They're called utility classes, and we denote that with that U dash. This doesn't really change anything. It's just kind of a naming convention. So in this case, we decided to use the utility class since we're just text aligning. And so again, we'll just format that with that U dash in the front of our attribute or class that we defined. So that's the end of that step. So next, we're going to have another exercise. So to catch up, run git reset dash dash hard, and then git checkout w0 dash step 3. So again, this is what we kind of have now. We have our image, our cat.png, and then we have a centered title, Buka Buka, and then we have our about us text here at the bottom. So the third exercise is going to be to use u-text-center to center the rest of the text. So before we had Buka Buka centered with our text here, and we're going to want to move that text to the center. So now we have Buka Buka, and the about us is also centered. So I want about 2 minutes to do that. And feel free, if you have any questions about any of the steps, to join weblab.is/ or go to weblab.is/q, and a staff member can help. add another 30 seconds for that. Okay, so now let's go ahead and center the rest of the text. So inside of our HTML file, we have our first section here and our second section underneath that. So for this first section, we're going to want to center that section to move it to the center. So we can just say class equals, and then the name of our class, which is u-text-center. And if we save that and refresh the browser, that text will get shifted over to the center. And it'll be the same for the second section as well. And so with that, we have centered all of the text on our CATbook profile. So that's the end of that exercise. So now we can run git reset -- hard and git checkout w0 step 4 to get the code for the next step. So next for our profile, the next step will be to import fonts. So in exercise 3, we centered our text for our CATbook profile. And with centering it, we just added these class names to our sections to actually center the text. And so maybe we want to actually change the font of those headings and that the text. So to actually import a font, we're going to go to fonts.google.com. And once we're there, we're going to search for the font Open Sans. And there we can just click on our Open Sans font. And then once we click on our Open Sans font, we're going to get a menu that should look something similar to what's on the slide. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to actually choose light 300 and semi-bold 600. So we're choosing light 300, so you can just click on that and then click on semi-bold 600. And once we click on those, a side panel should open. If it doesn't open, you can click on this icon here at the top right. And we're going to want to click on this import here and copy everything between these the style inside of the style tag here. And once we copy that, we're going to go back to VS Code and go into styles.css, and we're actually going to import the font. So to import the font, we can just copy-paste that the way that it is, and that'll have imported the font into our CSS sheet. Then after we do that, we're going to go down to this bottom here, this other thing, and we're just going to press copy on that, and that should copy to your clipboard, and then go back to VS Code, and we're going to define a we're going to use body, which will style anything that's in the body of our HTML. And the reason for that is because we actually use the body tag here. So since we're actually editing the font style of our body, and we can just paste what we copied from the browser. So again, click import, copy this into our style sheet, and then copy this into a body class. And that'll have imported the font. I'll give everyone a couple minutes to catch up with that. Oh, yes. Yeah, so whenever we selected the weights back on the Google font, it changed the URL here. So the URL, we're importing Open Sans. Oh, yeah, so it comes from this import URL here. Because we're actually importing the family with this link, it actually comes with that import. So since we're importing this Open Sans font, it comes with it. Does that answer your question? Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, so with that, we can run git reset -- hard and git checkout w0 step 5 to catch up. So after you run the checkout or have implemented that, the font should slightly change. And so the next step is adding a nav bar. So to add a nav bar, we're going to use the nav tag to add the nav bar. And so the code on the screen is what we would use to add that. So in our index.html file, at the very top of our body, we're going to want to add in a nav bar. So we can use our nav tag, and then maybe we'll want to have some text in the nav bar called catbook. And we want to have that as a header in our nav. So we're going to want to put that in h1. And maybe we actually want to style our nav bar and make it more colorful. So first, we're going to actually need to define some colors to do that. So there's a thing in CSS called CSS variables. And we can define CSS variables and use them throughout our CSS and HTML. And so we're going to define our colors as those variables. So the way we can do that in CSS is use :root, curly our braces, and then define our colors. So root to actually store our variables. And for each variable, we're going to have to denote those with a double dash in the front of the variable name. So 2 dashes, and then maybe we want a primary color, which is this shade of blue here. So in status.css, we can use root and set a variable called primary, and maybe we want to set it to 396 DFF. And then maybe we also want to add a couple other colors. So maybe we want a gray. And maybe we also want a white. Yeah, I think it shouldn't. I mean, you can choose whatever colors you want, but in this case, we'll just use F7, F7, F7. So after we've defined our variables in root, how do we actually use these variables? So maybe we want to actually style our navbar using our primary color. So we'll have to create a new class, nav title, and to use the variable, we'll want to change the font color, and we want to use var to denote that it's a variable, and then -- primary. And maybe we also want to define the font size of the text, and maybe we'll want to use 20 pixels. And so at the bottom, we have a margin 0 and a font weight that's normal. And we're going to want to use these as well just to cancel out some of the styling that comes with the default the H1 tag that we used for our cat book. So we use H1, but it has styling already applied to H1. So in order to cancel that out, we're going to actually add some other stylings. So we'll add margin, 0 margins, and we'll actually want to change the font weight to be normal. I'm going to leave the code on the screen, but move the slides. So another exercise is to try changing the color in root and see the color change whenever we actually refresh the web page. So now whenever we refresh the web page, we have cat book, should be blue. Oh, sorry, actually. In our index.html, we actually have to style our navbar, so we need to add our nav title class as well. So after we add our nav title class into our HTML, it will apply the styles that we define in our CSS sheet. And so now you can try changing the color that we used in root to see the color change of the website, or of the title in the navbar. So I chose 5F, 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 and they will change the title of cat book from blue to gray. So with that, that finishes adding a navbar. So to catch up, you can run git reset -- hard, and then git checkout w0 - step 6 to catch up. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Andy to finish out the rest of the workshop.
All right, by show of hands, who still needs more time? Okay, maybe 30 more seconds. Yeah, in the meantime, make sure you get reset hard, and then you can check out W0 step 6. Okay, so this is going to be styling the navbar. So currently we have it so that a navbar has no background, the text is blue, but we want a more stylish navbar with like a navbar that stands out and text that's white. So this is an exercise. Feel free to play around. Try to make this image on the right show up. So this blue will be, the primary blue color that we just made, and the text will be the white color that we just defined as well. This should be just some simple CSS inside styles.css. But for this to happen, we currently don't have a wrapper around, or we currently don't have a class around for this nav, so we need to define a new CSS rule set for a class that will affect this nav element. Yeah, I'll give you guys 2 minutes to do this. By a show of hands, who needs more time? Okay, so let's first create a class for this navbar. So we'll say class equals, and I'll just call this nav container. We haven't defined this yet, but if we save and then just check out the website, it's not going to break. If you give it a class that it doesn't know, it's not going to break anything. But now we should just create this class. So we do dot and then nav container, and then curly braces. And inside here, we want the background color of this navbar to be blue. So we want this to be blue. And we defined a blue color over here that we're going to reference using the variable, the var text. So we'll type background color is var dash dash primary. Save that. And then let's go ahead and change the color of the nav title to be white so that we can actually see the text. So it's just these two changes in the CSS file. first we're creating the nav container class, and then we're changing the text of the nav title to be white. So now if I go back to the site, yeah, cool. Yeah. Sorry? Oh. Yeah, so the nav title is being applied to this heading, which is the text catbook. Like the background color is being applied to like the entire nav bar. I think this is actually a good time to like maybe inspect element and like see what's going on here. So if I look at this nav, like the thing that's highlighted is like the entire nav container. So when you put a background to it, it's like applying to the whole thing. But if I like hover over this H1, it's just hovering over that text. So the color applies to the text if I apply it in nav title. Any questions before we move on? Okay. Oh, yeah. Are you talking about like the length of the nav bar? Oh, the width? Yeah, so currently, if we go to styles and then nav container, there's no like, actually I'll get back to you in 1 second. I think this is a pretty good lead into this next step. So let's get reset hard and then check out step 7. Okay, so this step's going to be removing the margin that we see on our site that's all around here. That's making the site look kind of jank. Yeah, so this white space is kind of annoying. And the reason we have this white space is because Chrome automatically gives the body an 8-pixel margin. If you don't specify this margin, if you go down here, let me just select the body, you'll see that the body has an 8-pixel margin. So you're going to have this like white space all around your entire body. So a bit more about the margin. I guess like this step's going to be removing the white space that we see. We just looked at that. Yeah, so let's take a look down here. This is showing the margin, border, padding, and then content of this entire body. So this margin is 8 pixels all around. And what you see here is called the box model. So the box model is 4 components. Again, margin, border, padding, and then content inside. And when you inspect element, you see all the dimensions of this, which is pretty useful. Right now, we want to get rid of this margin, which is 8 pixels. There's no border or padding, which is fine. And then in CSS, you can modify the margin, you can modify the border, the padding. And just to show you what this looks like, let me just inspect this. You don't need to follow along here. I'll just show you what each of these looks like. So I can create a border around Buka Buka. I can give it a padding. If I give it a padding, it's going to give some space inside of this container that's outside of this content Buka Buka. So if I give a padding of like 20 pixels, so there's now more space inside this border, but outside of this content. If I hover over this, I can see it more clearly. I can also add a margin of 50 pixels, for example. And then now if I hover over this, this is the orange area that's all around the border, padding, and content. And then this border, I can also just create like a thinner border or a thicker border, and so on. So any questions about this box diagram? Okay. Yeah, so it's a pretty simple fix. We can just set the margin to be 0 inside our body. And then before we go on, since we might use this later, some CSS attributes like padding and margin can take ordering, or take multiple values. And the way the margins, for example, are determined is like if you give it one value, then all the margins on all four sides are going to be that value. If you give it two values, then the top and the bottom are going to be the first one, and then the right and the left are going to be the second one. So you go in a clockwise order. If you give it 3, then it's going to be 10, 20, 30. And this last one is going to be like whatever is across from it, so 20, since you didn't define it. And if you give it all 4, then all 4 are going to be like that in clockwise order from the top. So yeah, we're just getting rid of this blank space. And at the same time, let's also add a bit of padding for this container, so nav container, so that the text isn't like leaning against the border as much. Let's make that padding 8 pixels. Sorry, this section's a bit long. The other ones won't be this long. So we could add some arbitrary value for this padding, but when we're coding, we want to use something called the 8-point grid system. So what this is we standardize all our values to be multiples of 8 so that it's more aesthetic, so that it like looks better. Also, like when you're developing and you want to like estimate a size, when you're a developer, you're more used to like multiples of 8, so then you can like kind of eyeball like some size and make it like some multiple of 8. So instead of like making some random values like 24, 20, 34, and 34, we stick to multiples of 8 like 24, 16, 32, 8. Sometimes we use 4 as well. And then we define these values as variables inside of our root. Just go. We can go ahead and do that right now, actually. Let's make an extra small, which is 4 pixels. A small, which is 8 pixels. A medium, which is 16 pixels. And then a large, which is 24 pixels. So this means that we want a padding that's small. I guess the padding that we want is actually going to be 16 pixels on the left and the right, and then 8 pixels on the top and the bottom. Using ordering, or what I just described earlier, you can give it multiple values so that it achieves this result. So I'll save. Okay. Yeah, so now let's go into nav container. Give it a padding of var --s. So this is going to be the top and the bottom padding. Remember, we start from the top. And then we're going to do a left and right padding of var --m. Okay, let's see what this looks like right now. I'll refresh. Cool. Yeah, so we see a padding of, let's see. Yeah, padding of 8 on the top and then 16 on the left and right and 8 on the bottom. And then finally, let's go to our body and get rid of this margin that we were talking about. So inside of body, just add the line margin 0. And this should get rid of that white space that's around the body. Okay. Show of hands, who needs to catch up still to this step? Okay. Also, feel free to ask questions if you have any. Yeah. Oh, yeah, so this margin is being applied to body, which is like our entire thing. So before I added this margin, it looked like this. There's like some white space around, so now we got rid of that white space. Okay. Just some other good things to know. You can change the width and height of the content. When you go into CSS, if I go into like nav container and then change the width to 100 pixels and height to, you don't have to follow along here either, 50 pixels, save, it's going to change the content size to be 100 by 50. So note that this doesn't include like margins or the border or padding. One more note is instead of using pixels, we can also use something like percent. So if I hover over this, right now it's only taking up this much space. You saw that like when I hovered over the whole thing, it's only covering. It's not like covering any of the space over here. Now, if I wanted it to like fill the entire parent container, then I can go here and then say width 100%. And what this says is it looks at the parent container and copies the parent container's width. So if I save that, then refresh, it's going to fill the entire thing. But I don't need to do that. It's going to fill by default. So. Cool. So that's the end of that long step. Any questions? If not, let's get reset hard and then check out step 8. Okay. So this step should be pretty quick. All we're doing is we're gonna take this image and add a little border radius for it on all 4 corners, and we can use the border radius property in CSS. So the border radius will put a circle, I guess, with radius of the value that you give, and then round it like that. So this radius would be 50 pixels in this example. So using some of the variables that we gave, using the 8-point system, just give this image some borders, some rounded borders. I'll give you guys 1 minute to do this. Okay. Yeah, so let's just go into our code. I'm trying to change the CSS or the styling for this image. One option is I can just directly give it a class. I'll call this class avatar. So save, and then inside my CSS, I'll create the class avatar, and then give it a border radius of, let's do a medium border radius. So 16 pixels. All right, if I save, Again, the changes were just, I added this avatar class, and then I applied the class to this image. So if I go back to this code, it applied the border radius to all of the corners. Cool? Okay. All right, let's get reset hard. Check out step 9. As a side note, whenever you have questions about like how a certain property works, always just Google these properties. Yeah, like if you Google border radius CSS, the first result is probably going to be either W3 or MDN. Just take a look at the MDN descriptions, and it should be pretty useful. Okay, so for this step, we're going to try to make this profile picture a perfect circle. And this is going to be pretty hard. For the sake of time, just try this out for like maybe 3 minutes. But I might not explain all of it since it is a lot of CSS. Just try to get as far as you can. Yeah, for this step, really try to use the internet. Just search up like, oh, how do I make something, I don't know, perfectly round using border radius? Yeah, sure. Anyone want to share how they're approaching this? It's okay, this one's pretty hard. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'll try that out in a bit. Okay, yeah, let me just try something out. So let's go into avatar. I guess our first step is, what do we want our border radius to be? Well, we don't exactly know the size of our image, but again, we can use percentages to do it relative to like the size of the image. So if we do like 50%, then the radius is 50%. So this is going to make it pretty much an oval. All right. Cool. Another thing we can do is put a container around the avatar and then give it some padding. So I'll give it padding, 0 on the top and 0 on the bottom, and then I'll put this thing called auto, and this applies in the X direction, right, on the right and the left. What auto does is it either like right justifies it, left justifies it, or centers it. In this case, since I have auto technically on both the right and the left, it's going to center it by making the padding the same on the left and the right. So it automatically does this calculation for you. Now that I've made this container, I can put my image inside of here. And then give this the class avatar container. Okay, so if I save that, refresh, should also be there's a lot of CSS. Honestly, a great tool to use is ChatGPT. It should tell you how to do everything. Yeah. Okay, so once we resize this image down again, it should be fine. But for the sake of time, I'm going to skip on ahead so that we can get to the later steps. If you want to see what it looks like, just get reset hard and then get check out W0 step 10. I'll give you guys like 10 seconds to get here. Okay. So let's take a look at the website right now. It's almost what we want, but the key difference is the bottom is vertically aligned. The About Me section and the My Favorite Type of Cat section are vertically aligned. They're stacked on top of each other like that. But we want them to be horizontally stacked. So we want the direction to be horizontal instead of vertical. And there's a tool in CSS that's really useful that pretty much all browsers now handle, which is Flex. There used to be Float. Float could be used to like position elements within the parent container. We don't want to use Float anymore. Flex is a much better option. And I'll show you exactly how to use Flex. So it's a much more modern way of doing it, and it's a lot simpler, both in terms of like understanding and in terms of like implementing. So Flexbox is essentially like a really great way to arrange your elements either in a row or in a column. Sorry. So either horizontally or vertically. So it has to be 1D, but it does let you control the sizing, the distribution, and more about the items such as like spacing and stuff. So in this case, we're worried about direction. So we want our flex to be a flex row. Yeah, so this graphic kind of shows you like what it looks like when you apply a Flexbox to some div. So this div has the flex class applied to it, and this class has the property display flex. That's how you make a Flexbox. And then you set the flex direction to either be row or column. So when it's row, it's like this, and when it's column, it's like that. So let me first go out here, and then I want to create a div around these two sections. So I just put open div and close div around these two sections. All right. Now let's go back to styles. So earlier we made a utility class called uTextCenter. This is a class we make if it's only just one property. So we can make another class called u-flex, which is simply making the display flex. So I'll save that, and now I'll apply this class to this div, so u-flex. Okay, so if I save this, reload, now they're in a row. And note that we didn't have to specify the flex direction because flex is automatically rows instead of columns. But if I did want to specify the flex direction, I could, just for clarity. But if I save this and then refresh, it does the same thing. Okay, any questions about this? What Flexbox is? All right. Okay. Let's get reset hard, and then get checkout W0 step 11. Should be either the last or the second to last step. We're getting very close to our final product. Okay, ready? Make sure you get reset hard and then check out step 11. So our final step is just to size these boxes. We want them to be equally sized and to fill up like the entirety of their halves. So flex is also really useful for sizing. This is something that we can define for the elements that are inside the flex box. So if we take a look at our code, we have this flex container, or this flex box inside this div. And each of these sections, this section and that section, are children of this parent container. So these are flex items. And we can apply some class to them so that they work as we want it to fill up half the container. So let's apply the class subcontainer to both of these. That should be it for our HTML. All right, and then let's go to styles. and let's create the subcontainer class. So, a bit about these properties. Flex basis is like the minimum that the size is, or like the default size. So if we don't specify any size for it, then we see that the flex basis was 0. However, since these items, or since these elements have like a width of themselves, it's going to take that width. But if we made the flex basis like much larger, like 100 pixels, then these would all become 100 pixels if they weren't already. Like that. The other thing we're going to use is flex grow. So flex grow is pretty much like how much of the parent container you're going to take up. And it's actually pretty simple. If you just make this class have property flex grow is 1, then anything with this, like since this is only 2 sections inside this container, and each of them has the subcontainer class, then they're each going to have flex grow 1, and this is kind of like the proportion that you grow, like relative to other children. So it's going to grow the same, or both of them are going to be the same size, pretty much. Let's make a flex basis of 0 as well. All right. So if I refresh, it looks really good. And then to verify that it's actually working right, I can open up this div, and then see that each of these are half the parent container size. Okay. Any questions about anything in this workshop? Yeah? All right. So I think we got it. This is your first workshop. It could have been really hard if you haven't done CSS and HTML before, but we hope that this really showed you a lot of like the most useful features in HTML and CSS, so that if you want to create like a static website for yourself, you know how to start. Flex is pretty difficult, but also very useful. So when you're building your projects, you really want to be using Flexboxes instead of Float or any other things that you might see. Also search up Grid. Grid is used for like 2D arranging instead of 1D. But these links are pretty good for learning more Flex. And then just some homework if you want to like practice some more. Check out step 13, and then step W0 complete should have the final version of the website. Okay, yeah, and we'll learn more CSS in the advanced CSS lecture next week. Should be it for the workshop.